Why does making your first 100K feel nearly impossible, but the second 100K starts to feel almost predictable? That question alone exposes one of the biggest misconceptions about money. Most people believe the journey to wealth is linear, that if it took 5 years to reach your first 100K, it will take another 5 to reach the next. But in reality, wealth doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows in curves, in momentum, in shifts that are invisible until you cross a certain threshold. In the beginning, it feels like nothing is working. You save a little, invest a little, try to be disciplined, but progress is painfully slow. You check your account and the numbers barely move. It feels like you're doing everything right, yet the results don't match the effort. That's because at this stage, your money isn't powerful enough to make a meaningful difference. You are still the engine. Your income, your time, your energy, everything depends on you. This is where most people get frustrated. They assume the system is broken, or worse, that they're not capable. So they quit. They spend more, save less, and convince themselves that building wealth just isn't realistic for them. But the truth is far less dramatic and far more important. They simply quit before the turning point. Because 100K is not just a milestone, it's a shift in physics. Before that point, every step forward feels heavy. You're pushing uphill, constantly battling expenses, unexpected costs, and slow returns. But once you reach that threshold, something subtle but powerful happens. The effort required to grow your money starts to decrease, while the results start to increase. Suddenly, your investments begin to contribute in a noticeable way. A modest percentage return is no longer just a small number. It becomes something tangible. You start seeing progress without needing to constantly increase your effort at the same rate. That's when it clicks. The game has changed. But here's the part no one talks about. Reaching 100K is less about financial knowledge and more about endurance. It's about continuing when the rewards are delayed, when the growth feels invisible, and when it would be easier to give up. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence or opportunity. They fail because they underestimate how long the hard phase lasts. So the real question isn't, how do I make 100K? It's, can I stay consistent long enough to let the system start working for me instead of against me? Because once you cross that line, you're no longer relying solely on effort. You're benefiting from momentum. And momentum, when it comes to money, is everything. So what actually changes when you reach 100K? On the surface, it might look like just another number in your account. But underneath, it represents a complete shift in how money behaves in your life. Up until this point, progress has likely felt slow, almost disconnected from the effort you're putting in. You save consistently, maybe invest when you can, but the results don't feel proportional. That's because, early on, your money lacks scale. It doesn't have the weight to generate meaningful returns. But once you hit that 100K mark, something different starts to happen. Your money begins to create noticeable outcomes without requiring the same level of input from you. A percentage gain that once felt insignificant now translates into real, tangible growth. And that's when you start to understand the true power of compounding, not as a theory, but as something you can actually see and feel. This is where momentum becomes real. Before 100K, you are responsible for nearly all of your financial progress. Your income drives everything. If you stop working, your progress stops too. But after 100K, your money starts to share that responsibility. It begins contributing alongside you. And even though you're still working and earning, you're no longer the only force pushing things forward. This shift also changes how you think. When you're operating with smaller amounts, your focus tends to be short-term. You're thinking about expenses, bills, and immediate needs. Every financial decision feels urgent. But as your capital grows, your perspective naturally expands. You start thinking in terms of years instead of months, strategy instead of survival. You begin asking better questions, not just, how much can I save, but where will this money have the greatest impact over time? Another subtle but powerful change is optionality. At 100K, you start to gain choices that didn't exist before. You can take calculated risks. You can explore opportunities without feeling like one wrong move will set you back completely. That could mean investing in a new skill, starting something on the side, or simply having the confidence to say no to decisions that don't align with your long-term goals. That flexibility is incredibly valuable, and it only becomes available when you've built a certain financial foundation. But perhaps the biggest shift is psychological. When you see your money growing in a meaningful way, it reinforces your behavior. It creates a feedback loop. You become more consistent, more intentional, and more disciplined, not because you have to, but because you can see the results. Progress becomes visible, and visible progress builds confidence, and that confidence changes everything. It removes the constant doubt that you're not doing enough or too late to start. Instead, you begin to trust the process. You understand that wealth isn't built through one big decision, but through many small, consistent ones over time. So while 100K might seem like just a financial milestone, it's actually a turning point where effort meets momentum. It's where your money stops being passive and starts becoming active. And once that happens, the entire journey feels different, not easier, but far more aligned with how wealth is actually built. Here's where most people unintentionally slow themselves down. They focus almost entirely on saving and investing, believing that discipline alone will get them to 100K. And while discipline matters, it's not the most powerful lever you have, especially in the early stages. The real driver at this point isn't how much you save, it's how much you can earn and how intentionally you manage the gap between the two. At the beginning of your journey, your income is your greatest asset. It has far more potential to change your trajectory than any investment return. A 10% return on a small portfolio won't move the needle significantly, but increasing your income can. That's why the focus should be on building skills that are valuable, transferable, and in demand. Whether it's improving your current career path, negotiating a higher salary, or creating additional income streams, the goal is simple: expand your earning capacity. This might mean taking on work that stretches you, learning something new after hours, or stepping into opportunities that feel slightly uncomfortable. Because in this phase, growth doesn't come from staying efficient, it comes from becoming more capable. And every increase in income gives you more flexibility, more room to save, and more power to accelerate toward that 100K mark. But earning more is only half of the equation. The second challenge is making sure that increased income actually translates into progress. This is where lifestyle inflation quietly works against you. As your earnings grow, it's natural to want to upgrade your lifestyle. Better experiences, more convenience, small rewards for your hard work. And there's nothing wrong with that in moderation. The problem arises when every increase in income is matched by an increase in spending. If that happens, your financial position doesn't change, even though your effort has increased. You stay in the same place, just at a higher cost. That's why it's important to create structure. Decide in advance what percentage of your income will go towards saving and investing, and treat that as non-negotiable. Automate it if possible, so the decision is made once and repeated consistently. This removes the need for constant willpower and ensures that your progress isn't dependent on motivation. The final piece is consistency in investing, even when it feels underwhelming. Early on, it can seem like your contributions aren't making a difference. The numbers move slowly, and it's tempting to pause or redirect that money elsewhere. But this stage is about building the base. Every contribution, no matter how small it seems, is laying the groundwork for future growth. Think of it as setting up a system rather than chasing quick results. The system might not look impressive at first, but over time, it compounds into something much more powerful. The key is to stay engaged without expecting immediate gratification. Progress at this stage is subtle, but it's real. So reaching 100K isn't about finding a shortcut or a perfect strategy. It's about aligning three things: increasing what you earn, controlling what you spend, and consistently investing the difference. When those elements work together, progress stops feeling random and starts becoming predictable. And that's what ultimately gets you there. Not intensity, but sustained, intentional action over time. Reaching 100K isn't just a financial milestone. It's a reflection of the person you had to become to get there. And that's the part that often gets overlooked. People focus on the tactics: where to invest, how much to save, how to increase income. But the real transformation happens internally. because the habits, decisions, and mindset required to build that first 100K are fundamentally different from the ones that keep you stuck. At the start, it's easy to think in short-term terms. You want quick results, visible progress, something that validates your effort. But building wealth doesn't reward impatience. It rewards consistency, delayed gratification, and the ability to prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term comfort. That means making decisions today that won't feel rewarding immediately, but will matter significantly in the future. This is where identity comes into play. Instead of asking, "What should I do to reach 100K?" a more useful question is, "What would someone who has already reached 100K do differently?" That subtle shift changes your behavior. You begin to act with intention rather than reaction. You become more selective with your time, your energy, and your money. You stop chasing every opportunity and start focusing on the ones that align with your long-term direction. Another important shift is how you handle discomfort. The path to 100K isn't smooth. There will be periods where progress feels slow, where motivation drops, where other people seem to be moving faster. In those moments, it's easy to doubt the process or compare your journey to someone else's. But the people who reach that milestone aren't the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who learn to operate despite it. They understand that consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need to make perfect decisions every time. You just need to make reasonable decisions consistently. Small actions repeated over time create results that feel disproportionate to the effort. And once you see that pattern, you stop looking for shortcuts. You start trusting the process. There's also a shift in how you view money itself. Instead of seeing it as something to spend or even just save, you begin to see it as a tool, a resource that can create opportunities, reduce stress, and give you more control over your life. That perspective changes your priorities. You become less focused on impressing others and more focused on building something sustainable for yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you start to detach your progress from external validation. You're no longer making financial decisions based on what looks good to others or what feels immediately rewarding. You're making decisions based on what moves you forward, even if no one else notices. Because at the end of the day, 100K won't solve every problem. It won't suddenly make life perfect. But it does something far more valuable. It changes your trajectory. It proves that you can build something meaningful through consistent effort and disciplined thinking. And once you have that proof, your relationship with money and with yourself fundamentally shifts. You're no longer hoping things will work out. You're creating a system that makes them work out. And that's the real difference.